Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone Show this evening.
Hey, and a pleasant afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the Water Zone Show. I'm your host, Rob Starr, along with the super host, Mr. Chris Davey. And we're here to go through a great hour of a show. And Chris, welcome. How you doing?
Splendid today. Thank you very much, Rob. And I know you haven't mentioned it yet, but we've got a short first segment here today because of an extended second half of the show. So why don't we get right into it?
Yeah, so bring on Miss Chris Austin, the wonderful purveyor of Maven's Notebook. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Hey, just a quick question. Did you get a new keyboard?
A new keyboard? No.
Yeah, because the wall of typing you do, you must wear those suckers out pretty quick. you do amazing. Anyway, bring us up to date. What's the biggest story this week in California water news?
Well, actually, I'm going to go back to when we didn't really get a chance to talk about it last week, and that is the probably the most misunderstood and misreported regulation enacted by the State Water Board in California called the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation. This came from a bill that actually was passed in the Jerry Brown era, and they have been working to implement this regulation since that time. It's very, very complex. Essentially, the state is going to figure out a water budget for every water agency in the state, and it's done flyovers by satellite, and it's looked at what is hardscape and what is an actual landscape, and it's giving the agencies data to figure out individual water budgets for each individual home. And so that's what your water agency is going to want to try to get your water use in line with that number. Now, there's a lot of things that go into the water budget for the agency, not only residential, but there's what they call commercial, industrial, and institutional. Those are like, industries that use water. That's a large landscape that you might have at a university or a large grassy area. So there's a figure in for that. And then they've calculated all kinds of variances. If you use a lot of evaporating coolant, then you get some extra in your budget. They have credit for recycled water. If it sounds complicated, that's because it is. It's very, very complicated. And it's not, while the water agencies in the end kind of, had to kind of go with it, there's a lot of problems. And I imagine, as most things in California water, that this is going to be challenged. But one of the things that kind of tends to get reported in the news about this regulation is they tend to make it sound like it's going to affect you at the individual level. So if you go over your water budget, then you're going to get a bill, a fine. And that's not the way it works. Actually, they put the onus on the water agencies to encourage you to keep your water use within this budget, but of course no one can force you to do that. So that's one of the problems that I think that the water agencies see with this regulation. They can't, most of the water use happens outside, outdoors on your landscape, and changing out a high water intensive landscape to a lower water use landscape costs a lot of money, and it also takes some training and some changes, because you can't go from a high water use landscape to a low water use landscape, but then irrigate it the same way you did for the high water use landscape. You have to change the way you do things. And that is really a very large lift for a homeowner, unless you're very good at gardening. So, it's also very expensive.
That's going to be really tough on the water agencies. Like you said, they can't force them. What could they do? Raise rates to them? Because the fines that I heard about are going to be pretty steep to the water agencies.
Yeah, and there's a lot of concern that these, a lot of these communities that aren't very well heeled are going to have trouble complying, and they're going to start getting fined. And they're worried, and understandably so, that what this is going to mean is that disadvantaged communities, people are just going to have to turn off their landscaping water, and so you're going to have dead trees and dead landscapes in disadvantaged communities in order to comply. So that's a real issue, and I don't think that they satisfactorily dealt with that issue in the regulation. They're sort of saying that it's up to the water agencies to make sure that they have enact programs that are equitable to people regardless of their income. But there's a lot of questions on this regulation, and I imagine that, like most things in California water, someone's going to file a lawsuit.
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, I'm surprised they haven't done it yet, quite honestly. I mean, this regulation has been passed like 2 weeks ago, so, somebody's slow.
I'm surprised myself, Chris, and the fact, add to the fact that, you got to put the commercial contractor into this mix as well, right? The guy who's going to be taking care of properties, maybe not in disadvantaged neighborhoods, but other neighborhoods. And that's, you say it's a large lift for a homeowner. It's a large lift for some contracting companies as well.
Oh, yeah, or your lawn service comes out. You're like, well, I don't have a lawn now. I have this. Take care of this. They may or may not know how to do that.
Correct.
Wow. Well, we got to take a look at this in more detail and get the released statements or the document from the state board, because I'd like to read that and go, because I know when I participated.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
You could, because when I participated in some of the discussions, I know with Fiona Sanchez from Irvine Ranch Water, they spend millions of dollars over the last decade getting people to reduce their water and put rebates and everything in place. But to get to the next level, it's going to be really tough for them. And and I'm sure that I know
people do it.
No, he can't. I'll just leave it at that. Chris, thanks for coming on. I know it's a short thing, but we have a long conversation coming up with the next guest, and I appreciate you coming on and giving the most important thing that we had to talk about this week on water. For all our listeners, as I always say, please go to mavensnotebook.com, become a subscriber. It's a great way to get all your water news every single day. And I keep saying, I don't know how she does it, but she does it. She's just an awesome lady. I asked her earlier before the show started if she had to buy a new keyboard for her computer, because she types so much that I can't believe there's any letters on the keyboard anymore, but we do appreciate that. And you can also become a sponsor by going to her website, www.mavensnotebook.com. It's a great thing. Help support her. We do. She's a wonderful lady. She's inducted into the Green Industry Hall of Fame. She's worth every penny. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a short break from one of our sponsors, then we'll be back with our special guest, so stick around. It's going to be pretty interesting.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
Get ready, because the forecast for this May through June is a torrential downpour of points. Site One is proud to introduce our exclusive NDS Point Storm 24 event. Partners Program members who use drainage, hardscapes, and irrigation products can earn up to 4x the rewards in May and June for purchasing quality NDS products. That's 4x the points on a whole range of product solutions for residential and commercial projects. NDS is a leader in water management solutions and is known for superior quality and performance, as well as ease of installation and extreme durability. You can count on Site One and NDS to help you grow your business. NDS Point Storm 24 from May through June. It's the perfect storm of points and performance.
Is KCAA.
Oh, well, all right, everybody, and welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone radio show. My name is Chris Davey. I'm your host, and I'm along here with the all-knowing Rob Starr, who's perched at the other microphone here. We certainly appreciate you taking the time out and listening to us today. We know your time is important, so to give us a few minutes of that time is a great honor for us. Thank you for tuning into the Water Zone. We have an absolutely great guest today. His name is Doug Larson, and Doug, for many of you who know who Doug Larson is, he's the president of Ag Water Chemical, with its main office in Fresno, California, where that's not always where you'll find Doug, because those of us who know him know that he has a great passion for bringing awareness to the industry and to society on the importance of water to our industry and in society. We're going to talk about that as well as a little bit about Ag Water Chemical and full service water treatment for long-term system viability, for reliability, efficiency, performance. We're going to talk about some new tools and some new thoughts out there in the industry for micro and drip irrigation and some other things with Doug. So before we get going here, Doug, welcome to the Water Zone.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome, Doug. You know, we've been working on it for a while, trying to get you on the show here. So, as I said before, most of us in the industry know who you are, Doug, but we have many listeners, I'm sure, that would like a little background from you. So, why don't you take a few minutes, tell us about yourself, you know, and kind of start it off by how you got into this industry. What brought you to the water segment?
Sure. It's always interesting to hear what brings people to this side of the industry and where their passion comes from, and gives you a little perspective. And so for me, we although we're from Colorado and I live there now, actually, but I spend obviously a great deal of my time in California. We moved to California in when I was a young boy, as I had a sister with some health issues. So we moved to San Diego County, and this kind of dates me, but as drip was brought to San Diego County by Dick Chapin in the early 70s, 1970s, that is, we had taken drip tape and placed it into our greenhouses. We were living in the Otay Mesa area, which is now where the border crossing is. But in those days, it was all a production ground, and so we got into the drip early on. And so I kind of created this passion as a young boy, literally created this passion about water and truly about drip as well. And so through that time, we ended up moving back to Colorado. I went to high school and college there. While I was actually initially in those first years of college, we actually installed our first subsurface drip irrigation system in Fort Collins, Colorado, 1983. So from that time to this time, it's although I've not always been in the water industry that entire time, it's been a huge passion. My degree's in ag education, so I was a high school ag teacher, taught some adult courses as well. But and even through those years, my passion for water has maintained through that entire time and actually grown. And so I came into the industry and have been in the industry for about 25 years as just in the water, as a water professional, but I come with a long background, and of course I still consider myself to be an educator. And so this is what I have a passion for this, so I like to educate people on what we do in water.
All right, appreciate that. Nice background information there, Doug. And I know, you and I have been acquainted for a good long time.
Yes.
But so now with Ag Water Chemical, right? An important member of our industry, not just on the ag side, but in general. 25-year anniversary this year, I think, if I'm correct, Doug. So let me know if I am, first of all, and then kind of give us, give us like the 30,000-foot view of Ag Water Chemical, how it came to be, and the background.
Sure. Yeah. Ag Water Chemical truly is. This is our 25th year. the company kind of originally started a little bit even before that, before it became official, and so the company's been around a long time. And really, the idea behind that comes from that same mentality that I spoke of it with regards to educating and helping growers and having efficiencies in water application. So that's where that evolved from over all these years, and so the company has grown over that time. Of course, that this is the name of the game. You're always looking to grow and expand and become better at what you do. But it was based upon those, here in California, we have PCAs, pest control advisors. That isn't the case for many other areas in the country, in the United States, but that's how it operates here in California. And those pest control advisors go out and they help growers in the full gamut of all the applications that go on during the season. And so we looked at ag water chemical as it began. From a PCA perspective, it was started by a PCA, Richard Clevenger, who's still our CEO, and his idea is to bring that kind of one-on-one relationship that we develop as PCAs. I'm a PCA myself as well, and bring that to growers so that we can walk through the field hand in hand and help them with their system, really give them that full knowledge of what's going on with their water. And oftentimes we see that's not what happens all the time. And so we have a real passion about that. So we look at this full service application of what we do. We help growers with their reservoirs, obviously algae issues, bicarbonates and minerals, all the different kinds of things. For those people that might be listening that are not overly familiar with drip, you think about drip irrigation, those applications. You're pushing water through very small orifices. It doesn't take much of a contaminant to plug that emitter. And so obviously as those emitters get plugged, your efficiency factors go way down. So and we can talk more about that at length later, but what we're doing is using different kinds of chemicals depending on what the application is and what the water quality is. We use different chemicals to help clean that up so that we don't have those contaminants plugging drip systems. And so we have a full gamut of offering, obviously, so we can take care of any of those kinds of anomalies that are taking place, even from plugging from fertilizers, and we have a product that is EPA approved for application for gophers in subsurface drip irrigation and drip applications. We do other things as far as do DU analysis. All the pieces come together to help growers better utilize their water.
Well, Doug, welcome to the Water Zone Show. It's been a while since we talked, and I'm glad you're coming on the show. I guess the term Aggies is the agricultural people that in your business, but I know they're very cognizant of the need for maximizing water resources. Can you kind of give your perception of what you see with the farming industry and how do they see water and the bad rap that they get?
You bet. Yeah, it's sad to me. I consider myself an Aggie. Obviously that's my son is he's a fifth generation farmer and rancher in Colorado. I was a fourth at one time. My grandchildren will be the fifth, and it'll go on from there. So we have this is an important piece for us. And as you say, Aggies oftentimes get kind of a bad rap. People don't realize that we're all about efficiencies too. Of course, we hear different things, especially here in California. We hear different things about water plays for water. I realize water is an important piece, and we all do. And so we not only want to take care of that resource in the most efficient manner possible in ag, which is what we do today. But we also, these are our communities. So you think about it, I live in northeastern Colorado in a small town of about 1,000 people. we have 3 wells for that town. So when I talk about water, I'm not only concerned about water efficiencies for the economic impact of that region and all regions, frankly, but also to sustain our towns. Same thing here. I'm in Fresno at the moment. Same thing in this region as well. So Aggies truly do look at this resource as something they're trying to maximize, of course, when we feel threatened a little bit that we may lose access to water, or we may have wells shut down, or we'll have limited allocations of surface water. Those are big concerns to us because it affects us economically, of course, and affects our communities in an economic manner. But ultimately, we want to do the best we can and become as efficient as we can as well, because by maximizing source, we actually get a better ROI when it comes down to it, because we can assure that we're not wasting water, and with that water also comes nutrients. And so we're maximizing nutrients, maximizing water, maximizing energy as well by not pumping extra water or water that's not being applied to the spot that we need it to be. So efficiencies are a huge deal for those of us in the industry, and we're learning more and more all the time about using different technologies to become better at it.
Yeah, you're right about the farmers getting a rip at it. I know, especially in California, they're all complaining about the almonds. They're all complaining about alfalfa and all the water that's used for that. But the farmers got to be smart, because it's water's an expense to them. It's obviously it's a need for growing their crops, but there is a cost. And with California has this thing, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and it's really starting to limit the amount of water that the farmers can use. And I see, if they keep that up, that there's going to be a drastic change in the landscape of farming. Yeah. And I always tell everybody, I believe farming is the backbone of this country. And without food, and water, we don't have it. We have zero things. So, Chris, I'll let you follow up.
Yeah, I was going to say, Doug, I tell you, with the focus, I'm glad you put some focus on the viewpoint from the ag side, because, so much of us in our daily lives, we see news stories and stuff like that about water, and it's all focused on residential and, landscape irrigation and not so much on ag, but, that's the audience for that. We have a tagline here that says, water is the news, and it comes from the fact that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, water was, an occasional news story maybe, but today it is the news, right, Doug? I mean, every time, no doubt, you can't turn on the TV or a radio station without hearing a water story, correct?
No doubt about it. It's the limiting and unifying factor. We all need water. The other day we had a grower who was here in California this last couple of weeks, and they've been experiencing some serious heat in this region in the Central Valley, and we had a grower to reach out. Had tomatoes, and he had plugging, he had a subsurface system, and he had root intrusion issues. And so, as you know, tomatoes are about 95% water. So they're not going to be able to take that heat very well if we couldn't keep the water on them in a uniform manner. So we busted it out, got it done in 4 days, 4 crews, and because it is such a critical issue. And like I said, it's the unifying factor for all of us.
I agree. Yeah, I'll tell you. So, maybe let's get down to where the rubber hits the road, right? And talk about design and installation and maintenance of systems, drip systems and all other systems. I know that is hugely important to you. Tell us why.
Well, it's I look at it. I look at those early days when we first started putting drip systems in, and there was we've come so far from that point in time. Even technology has changed. We have pressure compensating emitters and all these different kinds of things that we didn't have at one point in time. And so we had limitations on us, and we still do have some limitations on us with regards to undulating fields and those kinds of factors that are out there. And so we've overcome much of that due to design work. We have engineers, and Rob is an engineer as well. All those people that have put the time in, the researchers to help us develop better systems. So today's system truly are pretty pretty darn efficient. That's just all there is to it. You look at, I know we've done a lot of work in strawberries over the years. We're looking to have up in those efficiency factors of 94% or so. I mean, literally, you think about that, 94% uniformity and efficiency. That's pretty incredible when we can get to that kind of level. So, of course, we have other crops that don't mandate that level of efficiency factor or the cost that goes to maintain that. But today we have these pressure compensating emitters. We have better quality products out there. We know more about how to adjust our irrigation. I see it. We have automation. I see it oftentimes when growers first switch to drip. They think oftentimes that it's going to be something they can manage from the pickup, maybe, or manage from an armchair somewhere. But that's not what the case is. Farmers are still farmers. You still need to shovel. You still need to get out there and take a look at what's going on in the field. But we have the ability to assure, if we can keep our systems running at their most efficient level, which we can do, and we design them at that level, we have the ability to place water, the same amount of water, at every plant or every tree throughout that entire field, or within a very short margin of error in the field, and which creates greater efficiencies of energy, as we talked about earlier, and water itself. Fertilizers are being spread with that water, and then at the same time, that creates a better return on investment. You have a more uniform crop. There's amazing things that we can do in that regard. And today, the people that are designing today, I always tell guys the first step is to find a really good designer and somebody that can advise you and service you through the entire process, help you as you begin that journey into efficient irrigation practices.
The way people maximize irrigation, and there's several, we all know, and maybe our audience doesn't know, there's several types of irrigating. I mean, you could do drip, you could do a center pivot, you could do flood, you could do overhead. It's an important factor that people understand about the many efficiencies, such as drip, and I know you brought up the drip systems. So there's two kinds of emitters that you can use or that come with drip systems or drip tape. You have the flat emitters, which they call it, and then they also have the cylindrical. Are there any benefits that you see that's a difference for those for the ag world?
Yeah, and even in tape, there's still some that have it built in, and it's not actually the attached emitter too. And so some of those old turbulent systems that we had early on that are formed in the tape itself. So yeah, some of the different factors. Obviously, there's cost. That enters into it. Some of the flexibility, for example, on the button emitters. Okay, we can remove those and take those out and replace them. One of the things that I always struggle with is that we see happen oftentimes is for a button emitter, for example, is assuring that we're replacing, if we have to replace a button emitter, that we're replacing it with the exact flow emitter that we took out.
Right.
And this happens oftentimes that's not what happens. The irrigator in the field or the hired hand, whoever that person is, they may have a bucket full of different kinds of emitters, and they just oftentimes put in another emitter. But the key is to assure that we're maintaining the integrity of the original design by putting the exact flow rate back in. So I do like the button emitter because you can replace it like that. Obviously, we have fan jets and all sorts of different kind of application emission devices today that we can use, and there are many good ones, and there's reasons for using different tapes, whether it's an inline emitter or not. And I don't necessarily say I would always do this one or that one. It really depends on the application. And I do see something happening quite frequently that concerns me a little bit, and we do see hard hose and drip tapes that are being buried sometimes, especially on the hard hose side, with inline emitters that are actually not designed to be buried in the ground. So there are different things that happen from time to time that we can do better about and learn and work on those efficiency factors, but making sure that we're using the best product for the job.
One quick follow-up question. Do you think that the water districts are helping? I know for homeowners, they give rebates. And there was a study done a while back that when California gave money to the homeowners to take out their grass, how much water did it really save? And then the people didn't know they had to pay tax on the $2 or $3 a square foot they took out when they received the check. But I believe that if they gave more rebates allowable to the farming industry, they could see a lot more water reduction in the long term because they use more water. And but I don't see a big push for that. I know larger farms are getting really smart, and they're into AI and all kinds of things with drones and flow sensors and all kinds of things. Do you see that needs to incur more effort to make that happen?
No doubt about it, Rob. I think you're right on track, and farmers are resourceful. Of course, you think about the things that are on their job description. If you wrote down all the things that your typical farmer is skilled in, it's amazing for most people. This is kind of off topic just a hair, but it always frustrates me when I see a farmer. Some depiction of a farmer on TV or a movie or whatever the case may be, because they're typically it's back to the corncob pipe, straw hat, and overalls, and that's far from our farmer today. These guys have so much knowledge, and so I look at these kinds of things and I think, okay, these are tools there are tools that can help, but economically, can they afford to incorporate those tools? And oftentimes, especially in some other areas, it's one thing to be raising almonds, although this year, as you both know, here in Southern California, the almond market's in a tough spot. Commodity prices are across the board in many ways are not very favorable to farmers at the moment, and so they're struggling and looking for places that they can save here and there. And the truth is, oftentimes this is what happens say if you're a corn farmer in Nebraska, it's an entirely different return per acre that you receive compared to on your 160 acre pivot. 130 of that is irrigated, and compared to 160 acres of almonds. So oftentimes those types of farmers don't have the economic ability to invest in some of these more efficient systems like drip, for example. It just there's no return on that, and so we need to help. There's no doubt to better utilize our water and become more and more efficient and maximize that resource in the best way possible. We'll have to have more abilities, subsidies, and there are programs through EQIP and other things through the NRCS office to help with that. But it is a critical piece because it's a long-term investment and not only long-term investment for the farmer, but truly it's a long-term investment for you and I as well, for all of us. We've got to do what we can to conserve and maximize that resource.
Yeah, it's a great roundup there, Doug, for sure. I'm going to tell you, I want to ask you more about system management and just a little bit, and kind of soil moisture and weather stations and flow meters and all that stuff. But I have a question. I've always kind of wondered this, right? When it comes to overhead irrigation, probably pivots I'm talking about here, right? Is there a difference? Is there an efficiency difference or an advantage or disadvantage from spring crops to summer crops? Just from a standpoint of water usage.
Sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. And we do see in some of those areas, this, for example, in western Kansas, this is somewhat common. They have a very strained water supply there on the Ogallala Aquifer. That's actually my home. That's where we are too, Ogallala Aquifer. And so they have strained resources. They've had to learn to kind of manage that in a way where at one time maybe there was a full pivot of corn, and you think about this, people, if they want to envision what that looks like when they fly over the midsection of the United States and they look down, they see all those huge circles. The majority of those circles all represent 1/4 of ground, or 160 acres. There's roughly 7 acres or so in each corner that's not irrigated. So that means there's around 130 acres of irrigated ground, somewhere in that line. And so when we look at those pieces, traditionally early on in the 70s, when much of that pivot irrigation really got rolling. Those were full circle, and they were just going. Over time, as water has become a more critical issue and something of greater concern, and we've created more efficient systems in some of those areas. Due to those water supplies, they are using kind of what you talked about. They are using, maybe they're planting half the pivot in the spring crop, because they really only have enough water to really efficiently water half of the pivot, and then that spring crop finishes up by June or so. So they kind of start switching it over in that time frame. Hopefully there's some outside moisture that helps, and then maybe they have corn or another crop that is on the other half of the pivot, the second half. So instead of trying to use the limited resource that they have for an entire 130 acres, perhaps they only do half of it at a time, and so it's more efficient in the fact that it's supplying that crop with more of what it needs in the time frame that they have, instead of trying to stretch that and putting on half the water that they would normally. So they can get a little better return. It is a little. It's a little cumbersome in some regards, but there certainly are spring crops and summer crops. We talked, there's alfalfa, of course, that is raised in that section of the country as well. But there's no doubt that some of those things are important pieces. We've done a lot, as well as in the pivot arena. We've done a lot in that regard in lowering those initial systems were much higher pressure. They had nozzles up on top. We have drop nozzles. We have lower energy systems now than we once did. So we've gained lots of growth in that arena as well as in that area.
Yeah, that's a great roundup for sure. I'll tell you. So let's get on to the next question, which I kind of alluded to, and that's if you can kind of describe for us how you've seen, over your years of experience, how farmers, how the ag industry has utilized and adapted or adopted all the great tools that have come out in the last 20, 25 years, right? Soil moisture monitoring, weather stations, flow meters, all that kind of stuff. Give us your point of view, Doug.
Yeah, the flow meter thing is such a hugely important piece. You think back to if we didn't have flow meters, we were basically estimating how much we're really putting on, and really we need to, not only for the economic side of it, and to be aware of what we're using as far as water is concerned. It's important for us to know exactly what we're putting on for our plant. We know what our plant needs are, so that's a huge component, is to capture how much water we're really using at each site. So that is pretty much standard across the board nowadays, and it kind of goes back to Rob's question a little bit about assistance. Many areas have had assistance for farmers for some economic assistance for farmers to install flow meters. So that's been a big deal. Now those flow meters are actually linked up, so we can see that data. We can see that data as we go along. And so as we do that, now we keep a real-time view of what that flow looks like. So that's a big deal for us. But as far as you think about you mentioned soil moisture monitoring, I think of other things like control, automation, all those other pieces to help us to be more efficient with what we have. And I look specifically at, we talked about pivots, so I'll talk about pivots just a little bit more. But to be able to turn your pivots off nowadays, most farmers that I know all do have remote monitors, remote applications where they can turn their pivots on and off from a distance. So if they do get some rain or whatever the case may be, they can shut that pivot off at any point in time and restart it when they want from their phone. That's a big deal, rather than driving around and trying to assess or just letting it run, even though we just had a 2-inch rain. Now we can really utilize that. Now you combine that along with things like soil moisture monitors that give us a real understanding of what's available in the soil profile. and how deep is that soil profile? Now we can start managing that as well. Are we managing the top 18 inches? Are we looking down the 30 inches? In the corn situation, we see soil moisture monitors that really help us see where we're pulling water from. And oftentimes, although the corn has a long root on it, and alfalfa has an even longer root, but we know that when we're pulling from the deeper section of the soil profile, it's because it takes more energy, and it's because we don't have quite enough in the upper profile. We can watch those kinds of things and adjust to it. So it's amazing what we can do. I'll just go into this quickly, but you look at things like precision planting. And what nowadays, when we plant corn, for example, if we're going, we have a circle pattern with the water application. So we want to actually plant in that circle pattern. So now we have boxes on the planter that can shut off as we go along. So it's all we utilize this GPS technology that can really help us. Now you interlink that with soil data, and now we know maybe perhaps at some point in time we'll be to a level where we apply the exact amount of water for the exact soil type, for the exact amount of seeds that we placed in particular areas, and it'll all be tied in. It has to be. We have to use AI in that regard because it's daunting to do it manually. You can't. We've tried it before with even 6 or 8 different soil moisture monitors on pivots. It's hard because you have undulating ground, you have differences in soils. So that's where AI is really going to help us. But we've come so far. It's exciting to think about where we're headed actually in agriculture and water efficiencies.
Well, with the invention of smart controllers, that helped a lot. But a lot of people didn't get the whole picture with that. Smart controllers get information which for the evapotranspiration, but you really need to come full circle and have a soil moisture sensor, because the ET tells you when you have to water, and the soil moisture says how much you have to water. And automation is amazing to me. And Chris will tell you that what I'm going to say is my favorite subject in the agriculture word, vertical farming. And I can't believe the expense of setting those up, but they're doing well. Chris just sent me information from a company in Sweden that we're going to try to have come on the show. I've seen several videos of vertical farming and things where everything is simulated as far as the sunlight. It's all controlled, so they use less chemicals on the turn. They use less water because you don't have that much evaporation being in a controlled environment all the time. How do you see that? I know it's new. I say new maybe for the last 5 to 10 years, and there's not lots of them, but it's very expensive to set up. But that's using a lot of AI, a lot of technology, a lot of smart biologies. Do you think that's going to be a sustainable future for people to go that route?
I'm curious about it. I've read quite a little about it, and I've been in some talks with it. We've spoken about it. I am curious to watch and see where that goes. There was ideas at one point in time that talking about vertical farming and where every building in a city like New York would have some of this incorporated into it. Will that happen? Probably not in my lifetime, maybe. But it's down the road. They'll continue to develop those things because there's structural issues that come with those kinds of pieces as well. There's weather, there's heat, and there's the cost factor. So there's so many pieces to it. But I think the no doubt that indoor farming has become a more important piece all along the board, whether it's full vertical farming or we're talking about greenhouses or shade houses, and even areas where traditionally they have very nice weather and they have better production. Talking about some places like Baja, for example, or places in Mexico where they have a huge amount of production. Those places many of them have gone into full-fledged into shade house production because they can have triple or better the production than they can outside, or full greenhouse production where they can have many times 7, 8, 10 times as much production as out in the open environment. So certainly that's all a part of this technology that's happening and it all goes back to efficient use of resources, back to square one where we started. It's interesting, but you're right. There's much to be seen there.
Throughout the U.S. and foreign countries, a lot of the major apartment houses, are going into having garden roofs. and
Sure.
hardened sign panels because it helps protect the buildings with heat and things of that. And that's becoming very popular, especially in Europe. There's a lot more of those happening in Europe, maybe in Denmark and Sweden and Norway and those places. But they're thinking, how do they reduce the temperature of the building and do all of that? Just like the discussion between artificial turf and real turf. What do you
Yes.
want to use? And I think there's so much technology that's coming up because people are asking, like you're asking and researching these questions that need to be addressed, and not like 20, 30 years ago when it took decades for something to come to fruition. It's now every 6 months new technology crops up.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. And we need to stir the industries about creation and automation and AI. There's pluses and minuses with AI, as I'm sure you heard on the news. But I think there's a lot of good things for that, especially in the medical business, and especially in ag and others. And I think we got to keep pushing the envelope. It's like I related to this, and I'm kind of silly, but the first time I saw a James Bond movie, Goldfinger, when I was young, okay, and the guy had a jetpack that he put on and flew up in the sky. You know, if you can think about something, you can create it. Now, it may not take a week or a month or 6 months, but you can do it. I mean, look where we are with space and everything else and all the advances in medicine. It came from smart people who just push the envelope every day, and I think that's important. I'd really like to see more technology and more efforts and dollars put into the ag world, because again, we run out of food. That's one thing. We run out of water. That's another thing. And put those together, and we don't exist anymore.
Right.
So
yeah, no, it's amazing. I think that a couple of thoughts that come to mind really quickly out of that. But you know, when we talk about soil moisture monitoring and looking at ET, you mentioned ET, and truly when we can look at ET on a local basis. Now we're not looking at some scale of what the state's doing or what a town in particular is doing, but when I can have a weather station that's at my location. Now I'm not guessing what it is from 10 miles down the road or 20 or 50. I know what it is right there in my backyard. So it's changed. That application has changed so much. And I look at the cell phones that we have today. You know, I've worked all over. You guys have too. You've traveled a lot, and you could be in the most remote area of pretty much any country today, and yet they have the world's data at their fingertips, wherever they are, in the middle of nowhere in Mexico or Africa or wherever. It's amazing what's out there. So there'll be big changes. It'll be interesting to see where it takes us. Yeah, I think it'll just make us more efficient and better at the things that we do. And you know, I remember when you were talking to John Farmer on here a while back, and he was talking about, you know, the green versus blue and those kinds of things. I think there was a conversation between you and he, Rob, and the truth is that's a real conversation for all of us. We've got to manage this water as best we can. We have to. So we're going to use all those pieces, all those tools to continue building on what we've started here and continue down the road long after you and I, all three of us are gone, long after us.
Oh, you're right about the weather stations and such, and you know, it's like golf courses. They have several weather stations online. But I remember, just real quick, I'm sure you probably experienced the same thing. You might be on the phone with your wife and you're driving and you're in the same city, okay, maybe within 5 miles of each other, and it's pouring at the house, but where you are coming, it's dry as a bone. And you know, you got to take that in consideration. You can't get data 20, 30 miles away. And people say, well, they call it historical data. I call it hysterical data, because you know, if it's 15 miles away and it's raining over there or it's snowing over there and your house is dry, guess what? It's hysterical. It's not historical. So.
No, exactly. I was just talking with the farmer last Sunday, actually, after church, and we were talking, and he was from about 2 hours away from us, and he was talking about his yields, and I knew what our yields were. It's harvest, wheat harvest time, and we were talking about the differences, and it's very close by. But the fact is, you have different moisture situations, and so the ability to see that in real time today is just amazing. My grandfather would have never dreamed of that. It's we've come so far, and it's only the beginning. We're going to keep going.
Right. Well,
Doug,
go ahead, Chris.
Doug, I was just going to say a terrific interview with you. I appreciate so much you sharing your insights and your experiences, not with just us, but our listeners as well. And I'm going to give you a chance to talk about your company, Agwater Chemical, in just a minute if people want to get in touch with you. But I'm going to take a guess here, and I want validation from you because, in my experience over the years and knowing you, the industry that we're in has really been something. I mean, you take this to hand, right? You're what they call a man of his word, right? I mean, that's who you are. So is the handshake and the verbal commitment is that still the way things are handled in the industry these days in your experience?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're speaking my language. Yeah, it's such an important piece. And this is one of the pieces that we talk about. I still say service. To me, that's when people are asking about design. You'd asked about design earlier, Robin, and when they're finding a designer, somebody to work with, whether it's a company like ours, it's a water treatment company, you want to find somebody that gives you that handshake, looks you in the eye and says, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And the truth is, it's not always easy to do what that agreement is. You have to bend over backwards sometimes to do it. But we know that they need that, and that's what the expectation is. That's what the need is, and that's what we want to carry out. So you want to find those kinds of professionals, and this is a piece I think that oftentimes, as all this AI and this level of there's so much research and data, and there's news companies popping in all the time. This is my advice to those companies that are trying to enter the ag sector on the AI side, is to have Aggies on their staff, have Aggies working with them, and really get to know what the people of agriculture are about, understand them, put your boots on, get in the field, and it's I can always, and this is kind of an old story, but I can always think back to when I was a kid, and a sales rep might come to the field that had had kind of golf shoes on, or shoes that were from obviously from an office somewhere, and here we are in our boots, we're sweating, we've got whatever the case may be, got our shovels, and we think, now this guy is telling us how we're going to do a better job of working in the field. But so I think that the practical side, and there's less than 2% of us now. I think it's 1.5% of us that are in production ag today in the United States. So that's a very small percentage. So we've got to incorporate those people when we appeal to those people.
Well, you're successful because you do three things. You say what you do what you say, and you're able to prove it. And you look them square in the eye and shake their hand, and that's what makes the customer trust you. And that's important. And that's what your company and you personally have gained over the many years in the industry. So on behalf of the industry, I'm part of that. Thanks. You were great.
Well, no, thank you, Rob and Chris as well. Thank you both. It's looking people in the eye, shaking their hand, and building a relationship is an important piece, and it's fun to be able to still do that. Honestly, I love what I do. I'm blessed in many, many ways. But thank you for having me today.
You got it. Hey, give just for in our last 30 seconds here. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about Agwater Chemical. Where can they go, Doug?
Sure. Go to the web, agwaterchemical.com. And, of course, there are numbers on there. They can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. So it's easy to find me on LinkedIn. Simply Doug Larson with Agwater Chemical. And reach out. Are happy to help. And I do appreciate the time on here, because I think this is such an important topic, and I appreciate what you guys are doing to bring this awareness to those people out there in the industry, and those people that are not in the industry. We have a lot to share, and we're here for. And this is an important piece of what takes place in the world.
It's been a pleasure, Doug.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, that was pretty interesting, Chris.
That was one of the best ones we've had on the ag side. I hope some of our ag listeners tuned in for that one. We'll certainly have it up on podcast by tomorrow morning, and it'll be available to our listeners. But man, what just a delightful guy! What a seriously knowledgeable professional in the industry. Just enjoyed that interview, one end to the other.
Absolutely. He's an amazing guy, and really appreciate him taking the time out to come on the show and give us that interview. We got some great guests coming up. Next week we have a gentleman named Lou Benden, and we're going to be talking about decarbonizing water. That should be an interesting conversation. And we have a bunch of other people following that in the next couple of weeks, so we're going to be very excited about that. And hope everybody listens in. So, Chris, thanks a lot for being on today. As usual, you're a great co-host, good producer, and love working with you. Anyway, to all our friends out there in the water world, remember our famous things that we have to tell you is please help
keep our planet
blue. Because if you like green, you gotta have blue. Gotta got both. Okay, people, have a good weekend. Stay cool, and we'll talk to you next week.
NBC News